I was 33 years old when my mother called me for the first time in almost a decade. The number flashed across my phone while I was standing in the glass-walled office I had spent years building from nothing. For a second, I thought it had to be a mistake. My mother never called. Not after the night they threw me out. Not after they chose my younger sister over me. Not after they made it painfully clear that in their eyes, I was expendable. The phone kept ringing. I stared at it, my chest tightening with memories I had spent years trying to bury. 9 years earlier, I had been 24 and halfway through college. I worked 2 jobs to cover my books and living expenses. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Emily, never had to worry about money. My parents paid her tuition. They paid her rent. They paid for her car. They even paid for her spring break trips. Whenever I asked why things were so different between us, my father always gave the same answer. Emily has more potential. Those 4 words haunted me for years. More potential. As if I didn't matter. As if all my hard work meant nothing. I tried to ignore it. I kept studying, kept working, kept hoping that one day my parents would finally see me. Instead, everything got worse. One evening, I came home from my shift at a diner and found my parents sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for me. The atmosphere felt strange, heavy. My mother wouldn't even look me in the eye. "Sit down," my father said. I remember feeling nervous immediately. I sat across from them. Then my father slid a stack of papers across the table. "What's this?" I asked. Emily got accepted into a prestigious graduate program. I smiled despite everything. "That's great." My father's expression remained cold. "The tuition is expensive." I looked between them, confused. "Okay." My mother finally spoke. "We need all our resources focused on Emily." A knot formed in my stomach. I still remember every word that came next. "If you want to stay here," my father said, "you'll need to start paying full rent. Otherwise, you'll have to leave." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're serious? We're making an investment in the child with the brighter future." The room went silent. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I was their daughter. Yet somehow, I was being treated like an obstacle standing in the way of their favorite child. What happened next would destroy my relationship with my family forever and force me into a life none of us could have imagined. I wish I could tell you that I stood up from that table, delivered some powerful speech, and walked away with my dignity intact. The truth is much uglier. I cried. I sat there staring at my parents, waiting for one of them to say it was a joke, waiting for my mother to tell my father he had gone too far. But neither of them did. Instead, my mother folded her hands together and quietly said, "We're doing what's best for the family." The family? That word felt like a knife. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't part of it. "What about me?" I asked, my voice shaking. My father sighed as if I were being difficult. "You're an adult, Sarah. Figure it out. Figure it out." Meanwhile, Emily was 22 years old, living rent-free, driving a car my parents had bought, and getting tens of thousands of dollars for graduate school. I looked at my sister, hoping she'd say something, anything. She didn't. She just stared at the table. That hurt more than my parents' cruelty. Because Emily knew how hard I worked. She knew I skipped meals sometimes to save money. She knew I picked up extra shifts whenever I could. And she still sat there in silence while my future was being ripped away. 3 weeks later, I packed everything I owned into my old Honda. 2 suitcases, a few boxes, and a lifetime of disappointment. Not one person helped me. Not my mother. Not my father. Not Emily. As I carried the last box to my car, my father stood on the porch. For one stupid second, I thought he might stop me. Instead, he said, "Don't expect us to bail you out if things get hard." Then he turned around and went back inside. The door closed. And just like that, I was alone. The first year was brutal. I slept on a friend's couch for almost 4 months. Then I rented a tiny basement apartment with stained carpets and a leaking ceiling. During the day, I worked at the diner. At night, I took online classes. I was exhausted all the time. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep wondering why my own parents didn't love me the way they loved Emily. I wasn't asking for luxury. I wasn't asking for expensive gifts. I just wanted to matter. But every time I felt sorry for myself, I remembered my father's words. The child with the brighter future. That sentence became fuel. Every rejection, every setback, every humiliating moment. I turned all of it into motivation. 2 years after being kicked out, I finished my degree. 3 years later, I landed a job at a growing technology company. For the first time in my life, I was making real money. Not enough to be rich, but enough to breathe. Enough to stop living paycheck to paycheck. Enough to believe that maybe my future wasn't over after all. Then, something unexpected happened. The company promoted me twice. Within 4 years, I was leading a department. The girl my parents had written off was suddenly managing teams, negotiating contracts, and helping drive major company growth. Meanwhile, I heard occasional updates about Emily through relatives. At first, everything sounded perfect. She graduated, got married, started a career. My parents bragged about her constantly. Every family gathering I wasn't invited to seemed to revolve around Emily's accomplishments. I pretended not to care, but deep down it still stung. Then the stories started changing. Emily's marriage wasn't going well. Her career wasn't taking off the way everyone expected. Money was becoming a problem. The golden child was struggling. Still, nobody called me. Nobody apologized. Nobody acknowledged what they had done. Years passed. I built a life that had nothing to do with my family. I bought a condo. Then later, a house. I made friends who became more like family than my actual relatives ever were. For the first time, I felt genuinely happy. And then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, everything changed. My phone rang while I was reviewing reports before a meeting. I glanced at the screen. My mother's name. I froze. 9 years. 9 entire years without a single call. 9 years without a birthday message. Without a holiday card. Without even a simple, "How are you?" Yet suddenly, there she was. Calling. I let it ring. Then stop. A minute later, it rang again and again. By the 5th call, I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. A voicemail appeared. I listened. The moment I heard my mother's trembling voice, my stomach dropped. "Sarah? Please call me back. It's about your father. And Emily, we need your help." For a few seconds, I couldn't move. Because after 9 years of silence, they hadn't called to apologize. They hadn't called because they missed me. They hadn't called because they loved me. They were calling because they needed something. And I had a feeling that whatever had happened was finally about to turn the entire family upside down. I stared at my mother's voicemail for almost an hour. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on with my day. After all, that's what they had done to me. They had deleted me from their lives. For 9 years, 9 birthdays, 9 Christmases, 9 years of struggles, promotions, heartbreaks, victories, and milestones they never bothered to ask about. So why should I care now? But curiosity is a powerful thing, and despite everything, they were still my family. By lunchtime, I finally called back. My mother answered on the first ring. "Sarah?" Her voice cracked. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she started crying. Not the dramatic kind of crying, the exhausted kind, the kind that comes after months of fear and stress. "What's going on?" I asked. "It's your father." A knot formed in my stomach. "What happened?" "He had a stroke." I closed my eyes. Whatever anger I carried, I never wanted something like that to happen. "Is he okay?" "He's alive," she whispered. "But things are bad." As she spoke, the picture became clearer. The stroke had left my father unable to work. Medical bills were piling up. Insurance wasn't covering everything. And Emily was drowning in problems of her own. Her marriage had ended in a messy divorce. Her ex-husband had left with most of their savings after a long legal battle. She had lost her job 6 months earlier during company layoffs. The golden future my parents had invested everything in had completely fallen apart. I listened quietly. Then I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "What do you need from me?" Silence. A long silence. Finally, my mother whispered it. "We need help." There it was. The real reason for the call. Not love. Not regret. Need. After hanging up, I sat in my office staring out the window. The city skyline stretched for miles. 9 years earlier, I had been sleeping on a friend's couch wondering if I'd ever escape poverty. Now, I owned a successful consulting company with over 40 employees. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter with less potential had somehow become the most successful person in the family. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. The same house where I had been told I wasn't worth investing in. The same house I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed how different everything looked. The paint was peeling. The yard was overgrown. The place seemed smaller somehow. Older. Tired. A lot like the people living inside it. My mother opened the door before I could knock. For a second, I barely recognized her. Her hair was mostly gray now. Deep lines surrounded her eyes. She looked 10 years older than her age. Then she hugged me. The first hug in 9 years. I stood frozen. Not because I wanted to, because I didn't know how to respond. Inside, the house felt strangely empty. The warmth I remembered from childhood was gone. My father sat in a recliner near the window. The man who had once seemed larger than life now looked fragile. One side of his face drooped slightly. His movements were slow. When he saw me, his eyes filled with emotion. "Sarah?" Just hearing him say my name after so many years felt surreal. I sat across from him. Nobody knew what to say. Eventually, my father broke the silence. "You look successful." I almost laughed. After everything, that was his opening line. "Things worked out," I said. His eyes lowered. And for the first time in my entire life, I saw something I never thought I'd see. Shame. A few minutes later, Emily arrived. I hadn't seen her since the day I moved out. The confident golden child I remembered was gone. She looked exhausted, defeated. There were dark circles under her eyes. The moment our eyes met, she started crying. "I owe you an apology." I wasn't expecting that. Not from Emily. Not ever. We sat at the dining table for hours, and for the first time, the truth finally came out. Apparently, Emily had spent years living under enormous pressure. My parents expected perfection because they had invested everything in her. Every mistake felt catastrophic. Every setback felt like failure. She admitted she had hated the favoritism, but was too afraid to challenge it. "I should have stood up for you," she said through tears. "I know. I'm sorry. I know." Those 2 words seemed to break something inside her. Then my mother began crying. Then my father. One by one, every excuse they had used over the years disappeared. No justifications. No blaming circumstances. No pretending they had done the right thing. Just painful honesty. My father looked directly at me. "Throwing you out was the biggest mistake of my life." The room became silent. For years, I had imagined hearing those words. I thought they would feel amazing. I thought they would heal everything. They didn't, because some wounds don't disappear when an apology finally arrives. They simply become scars. Scars that remind you where you've been. My father continued. "We convinced ourselves we were making a smart decision." His voice shook. "We thought success was something we could buy. We thought investing in Emily was the safest bet." He looked down. "We were wrong." Nobody spoke. Then he said something that stunned everyone. "You're the daughter we should have been learning from all along." For the first time, I saw genuine regret in his eyes. Not regret because they needed money. Not regret because life had become difficult. Real regret. The kind that comes when someone finally understands the damage they've caused. But then came the moment that changed everything. My mother quietly placed several documents on the table: medical debt, mortgage statements, past due notices. The numbers were staggering. Their finances were collapsing. Years of helping Emily, years of poor decisions, years of believing tomorrow would magically fix everything. Now the consequences had arrived, and they were desperate. My father looked at me. "I understand if you walk away." My mother nodded through tears. "You don't owe us anything." Emily stared at the table. Nobody asked for money, nobody demanded anything, and somehow that made the situation even harder. Because for the first time, they weren't acting entitled. They were simply facing the consequences of their choices. I looked around the table, at the people who had broken my heart, the people whose rejection had shaped the last 9 years of my life, and I realized something unexpected. I didn't hate him anymore. The anger that had fueled me for years was gone. In its place was something far more powerful, because I had already won. Not because I was richer, not because I was more successful, but because I had built a life they once believed I could never have. And now, for the first time, they finally saw my worth. The question was no longer whether I could help them. The real question was whether I wanted to, and my answer would determine how the story ended. I drove home that night with a storm of emotions swirling inside me. For years, I had imagined what I would do if my family ever came back into my life. In some versions of the fantasy, I slammed the door in their faces. In others, I reminded them of every cruel word they had ever said to me. Sometimes, I imagined making them beg, making them feel exactly what I had felt: rejected, abandoned, unwanted. But reality is different from fantasy. As I sat in my quiet living room that evening, staring at the city lights outside my window, I realized something important. The greatest revenge had already happened. I had survived. Everything they thought would destroy me had made me stronger. The daughter they dismissed had built a life they couldn't even imagine. And somehow that victory felt bigger than any act of revenge ever could. The next morning, I called my mother. She answered immediately, almost as if she'd been waiting by the phone all night. "Sarah, I've made a decision." The room on the other end went silent. "I'll help." A sob escaped her lips. But before she could speak, I continued. "There will be conditions. Anything." I took a deep breath. "I'm not giving money to cover mistakes and pretend the past never happened. I understand. You all spent years acting like I didn't exist." Another silence followed. Then she quietly said, "You're right. Attorneys and accountants." I reviewed every debt, every bill, every mortgage payment. The situation was bad, really bad, but it wasn't impossible. I paid for my father's medical treatment. I helped restructure their finances. I prevented the bank from taking the house, but I didn't simply hand over checks. Everything was organized carefully, responsibly. No more reckless decisions. No more favoritism. No more pretending problems didn't exist. For the first time in their lives, my parents had to face reality. And strangely enough, they accepted it. A month later, something happened that shocked me even more. My father asked if he could take me to lunch. Just the two of us. We ended up sitting in a small diner across town. Ironically, it looked a lot like the diner where I had worked after being thrown out. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me and said something I will never forget. I waited. "It isn't losing money." His voice cracked. "It isn't the house. It isn't my health." He stared down at his coffee. "My biggest regret is missing 9 years of my daughter's life." The words hit harder than I expected. He wasn't talking about business success, or money, or achievements. He was talking about birthdays, holidays, conversations, memories, the things families are supposed to share. Tears filled his eyes. I was so focused on who I thought would succeed that I failed the daughter who already had everything she needed. I felt my throat tighten. For the first time in decades, my father wasn't trying to control the conversation. He wasn't making excuses. He was simply telling the truth. And the truth was painful. A few weeks later, Emily called me. She wanted to meet alone. I wasn't sure what to expect. When we sat down together, she immediately started crying. Again, but this time, it felt different. She wasn't crying because her life had fallen apart. She was crying because she finally understood mine. I spent years being jealous of you. I blinked. Jealous? She nodded. I know that sounds crazy. It did. Very crazy. You were free, Sarah. I laughed softly. Free? I was struggling to pay rent. I know. She wiped her eyes. But you built your own life. She looked away. Everything I had came from Mom and Dad. Every decision I made was based on what they wanted. For the first time, I saw her differently. Not as the golden child, not as my rival, but as another victim of the same unhealthy family dynamic. The favoritism that hurt me had also damaged her, just in a different way. That realization changed everything. Over the next year, our relationship slowly healed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but honestly, for the first time, we became real sisters. Not competitors, not favorites, not disappointments, just sisters. And then came the moment that completed the entire story. Almost a year after reconnecting, my parents hosted a family gathering. Relatives came from everywhere. People I hadn't seen in years filled the house. At one point during dinner, my father stood up and tapped his glass. The room fell silent. He looked around before finally looking directly at me. Then he said something nobody expected. For years, I told everyone that Emily was my greatest investment. The room became very quiet. I was wrong. You could have heard a pin drop. My father continued. The child I believed in the least became the strongest person in this family. I've felt every eye in the room turn toward me. He smiled sadly. When Sarah needed us most, we failed her. My mother began crying. Emily reached for my hand, and my father finished with words I never thought I'd hear. She succeeded without our help. Then she came back and helped us when we didn't deserve it. His voice broke. I'm proud of you, Sarah. 33 years. It took 33 years to hear those words. 3 simple words. I'm proud of you. And yet, they healed something inside me that I thought was permanently broken. Not completely. Some scars remain forever. But enough. Enough to finally let go. That night, as I drove home, I thought about the girl who had packed her belongings into an old Honda 9 years earlier. The girl who cried herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't enough. The girl who believed her family had decided her worth. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her something important. Other people's opinions do not define your future. Not even your parents. The people who underestimate you are often the ones least capable of seeing your potential. And sometimes, life has a strange sense of justice. The very people who walk away from you become the ones forced to watch you rise. My parents funded my sister's tuition and cast me out. I thought they were investing in the daughter with the brighter future. 9 years later, life revealed the truth. Success wasn't created by favoritism. It wasn't bought with money. It wasn't handed to someone because they were chosen. It was built through resilience, determination, and refusing to quit when nobody believed in you. In the end, I got something far more valuable than revenge. I got my life, and that was the greatest victory of all. The end. Which country are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories.